Reinforcement is the stage that never ends. This is something that you need to constantly be thinking about because reinforcement isn't just, hey, you did your training, you're signed in, good job. It's, well, are you using it the way we wanted to? Are you doing as many activities in the system as we thought? Is it helping your process? Is it helping you move, if you're in sales, right? Is it helping you move your deals? If you're in service, is it helping you close more tickets and manage to a tighter SLA? I'm constantly looking back at those things. And this is really where I say measurables are king.
You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business.
Well, hello there, Tina. Very excited to have you today on our RevOps Champions podcast. My name is Therese Brinkman. I'm the Chief of Staff at Dynamico, and I'm filling in for Brendan Dunawalt today. Really excited for today's guest. We've got Tina Bishop, who is one of my colleagues here at Dynamico, and she is one of the best in terms of user adoption. We're both actually ProSci certified, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and really excited to talk more about user adoption and HubSpot implementations today. So Tina, please introduce yourself to our audience.
Great. Thank you, Teresa. I am simply thrilled to be here. Like Teresa mentioned, I am a specialist in change management, training, and user adoption, and have been in those roles with various companies over the past 15 years. So excited to be on the podcast today and excited to talk about some things as it has to do with RevOps and change management.
Awesome. And Tina, what first drew you to working more in terms of user adoption in these CRM implementations?
Yeah, that's a great question. As I look back through my background, I served in a lot of roles within organizations, sales, marketing, and customer service, but ultimately landed in user adoption because I thought it was so critical to bring people along and to make them excited and engaged about technology that could really change the way they did their jobs. I was also very passionate about making sure people had the tools and the information that they needed to see beyond just the role they were filling. So it's not about knowing what buttons to click, but it's really about understanding the way technology can be used to kind of transform the job that you do. And you can take that with you regardless of the role that you have currently. So I love to be able to help people kind of grow in their career paths.
That's great. I love to hear that, Tina. I think really similar from my career history as well in terms of, folks will spend a lot of money, time, effort in these technology implementations. They really want to bring some new transformation to their business. And the thing that I always thought about was, well, what about the people that have to use that system? Are they being cared for? Because like any investment, you want to get your ROI on it. And we know that you're not going to necessarily get the ROI on any technology transformation unless your team and your users are bought into that and know how to use it and are excited about using it as well. That's how you're going to really get to that ROI and get to the best results.
Exactly. People spend a lot of time and a lot of resources, on technology platforms, on getting them set up and sort of ready to go for their teams. But if you're not bringing people along from the beginning and getting them prepped and ready for the change, finding out what are the gaps in their knowledge, finding out how you can fill those gaps, then, you can have the slickest, most interesting, coolest sort of stuff out there, but it's not going to get a lot of use. And sort of like you alluded to, oftentimes I've seen organizations that kind of got to the end and then decided to bring in change management or then decided to bring in training. And really that's something that, needs to be given its proper due from the beginning.
Absolutely. I love that. We'll definitely circle back to that, Tina. I want to talk more about that and when in a project you want to get involved. But before we dive into that, let's take a step back and for our audience, let's talk a little bit more about change management as a practice. So Tina, you and I are both ProSci certified. So ProSci is one of the world's leading change management organizations. They do a lot of research. And so all of their frameworks, guidance that they have done is really based on real data, based on research that they're constantly doing, which is definitely why I was really excited to be trained by ProSci. I love putting that science behind what we're doing. And in ProSci, one of the things that they talk about is their ADKAR model. I'd love to talk to our audience a bit about the ADKAR model because that was when I first learned about the ADKAR model. It made change management something that went from very nebulous to me to something actually controllable and something manageable to do. So let's talk about the ADKAR model a bit here. Tina, can you tell us what the ADKAR model is? What does it stand for?
Yes, the ADKAR model stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement.
Very good. And so in that, those are five distinct stages that every individual needs to go through in any change, right? This isn't just a technology implementation or a CRM specific model. This framework actually applies to any individual change. And one of the most important things within this ADKAR model is it is sequential, and the sequence of this matters. And so when we talk about building awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement, we have to do it in that order. Um, Typically, what happens is that folks will see adoption rates pretty low, and you go back and you look at the ADKAR model, and you can find that they got stuck in one point. So let's talk a little bit more about each of these phases and things that we can do during a HubSpot implementation or any other CRM or technology transformation to help our team members work through these ADKAR phases. So let's talk first about awareness, which is the first phase, as we know, and is really where it all starts. So Tina, what would you say is really important to be doing during this awareness cycle?
Yes, great question, Teresa. And yes, great pickup. I just want to kind of go back and reinforce something that you said, that oftentimes, we get into these engagements, as you know, we as change managers or as trainers, and people are ready to skip right to the ability part, which is the training part. And they're like, okay, we built it. Now it's time to train. But yes, you're correct that all of these stages have merit, and you can't really skip over all of these and expect to have successful adoption. So the first A, as you mentioned, is about building awareness. And this really starts by identifying very early on what the objectives of your change management strategy are going to be. It also involves getting a key stakeholder, involved very early on in the process, or a project sponsor. Maybe that's a better label for that person. So someone that is really going to be very visible during the engagement, and someone who is really going to drive why this is important for the organization and what the benefits are going to be for the individual user. Now, sometimes organizations already have an idea of that. Sometimes we as change managers get brought in to sort of help them craft that messaging. So you want to build awareness early. And this really should start when you begin the process, if we're talking about a tech transformation or a technical engagement or doing something like HubSpot. This really should begin very early on in the process. So while you're thinking about, how the platform is going to be used, you also need to think about how you're going to build awareness among those key groups of people that are going to be using the platform.
I love what you said there, Tina, and really just to drive home to our listening audience here, really critical that the moment that you begin a project like this, that you are bringing that information back to your team. One of the things that I worked with many sponsors over the years on is this almost fear, this hesitation of, well, I don't know everything that's going to happen. I don't know exactly. And I'm really afraid to tell them one thing and then have to go back and tell them something different, right? We hear that often. And that comes from a great place. That comes from a great leadership approach of really caring for your team. But I really do challenge that, because I think worse things will happen if your team doesn't know about it and then they find out later and they make assumptions. So it's really important that you kind of take control of that narrative from the beginning as a company, as a leadership team, and tell your team, this is why we are doing this project. And there's going to be some common things that you're going to hear in this phase of awareness. We want to do this because we need to grow revenue, and right now we don't have the visibility to do that. Or we need to make sure we have standardized processes across our sales and our service teams. And right now, we don't know how to do that and tie it together with the data that we have, right? So there's always going to be a very specific business reason that our clients are going to go through this implementation in the beginning. Share with your teams what
Yes.
that reason is,
Yes.
why. And take it one step further. Don't just say why we're doing this. Dig into why now. Really, really critical for folks to understand why this is occurring to them right now instead of next year, instead of 2 years. What is happening in the business? What is happening in the economy? What is happening that is leading your business to go through this project right now? Bring that to your team. That really
Absolutely.
helps with that awareness piece.
Absolutely, Teresa. And I love the fact that you brought up all of those types of questions and all of those things, those pieces of information that are important to help build that narrative. And that's really for our listeners out there. That's really why having a dedicated change manager is really so important. Sometimes I think organizations think, okay, well, we're just going to send out a few emails about what we're doing and we're going to say this and then we're going to come in and have this great partner that helps us sort of build out the technology, and then we're going to kind of release it into the wild and see what happens, kind of the we know our people best. And then when they have issues with adoption, they sort of bring in a change manager after the fact. But like you said, Teresa, really having that change manager involved very early in the process can really help organizations kind of see it all the way through from the beginning.
Excellent. Absolutely agree. So let's shift now. Let's talk about the second phase. So in the ADKAR model, we talked about awareness. The next is desire. That's the D in the ADKAR. So desire is really when,
Desire.
yep, it's really when you take that awareness that you've built at the company level of why this project is occurring. And desire is when you make that personal, individual choice to engage with this change. It's really about the person, right? And what's in it for me is really how you're going to build that desire. So if you're going through a CRM implementation and you need your sales team to start entering their deals in a new way, you don't want to just tell them in that awareness phase, yep, this is why we're doing it. We want to grow revenue. We need to have more visibility. We need to close our deals faster. That's great. And they might buy into that right there, but they probably want to know a little bit more. What's in it for me as an individual seller going through this? Well, okay, as a seller, you are now going to get served up the actions that you need to do every day to make sure your deals stay in line. You might have to enter a couple more fields, but it's going to save you much in terms of efficiency in the long run. Talking to people at that level, how it's actually going to impact their day-to-day, their actual processes, and why they as a person can get excited about engaging in this change.
Yes, Teresa. This desire phase is so critical because you don't want it to be something that is inflicted upon people, or where people see it as something that's being inflicted upon them. This kind of one more thing that I have to do, or one more button that I have to click, or like you said, not really seeing that it's something that's actually going to help them in their day-to-day work. So getting that what's in it for me out there and really being able to speak to that and really being able to give them concrete examples of what it's going to mean for them and how they're going to use it to reach a certain goal within the role that they're playing. Sometimes, and Teresa, you probably have had these examples where organizations, strictly speaking from the top down, are saying where they're going to use it because we told them that they have to use it and that this is essential to, either, keeping their job or, maybe tied to some sort of KPI or some type of goal that we've set for them. And while that can be one way of sort of approaching it, it really doesn't get to tapping into what is it for the individual that's going to make the difference for them. And again, this kind of gets back into you want to be able to, at the end, have very high user adoption rates. And it really is, getting that messaging out about desire that definitely feeds into that.
Great. And so let's get specific with our listeners here. What are the things that they could do in this phase? We talked about an awareness. You're probably talking at more of the town hall level. You're talking in team meetings. You're bringing in that overall leadership sponsor to convey the messaging of why we're going through this and why now. But then what about desire? It probably doesn't work just to do that in a group forum, right, Tina? What would you really recommend for
Yes.
that?
So there are a couple of ways that you can get at what's going to tip someone's desire in favor of what you're doing. So, one of the things that some organizations have done is identify a group of who are going to be your super users or your change champions, getting from them what the pain points are for the individual roles that they represent. So, if you can get what those pain points are, and as specific as they can detail them for you, and you can begin to craft not only your messaging all throughout your change management campaign around some of those pain points. But those are also things you can have in the back of your mind as you look at what is going to be your training plan and your training strategy, because you do want it to speak to specific pain points. I like something that you also brought up, Teresa, about not making it generic, not making it, well, we're going to, help you reach your goals faster. And won't that be great? Sometimes it's as specific as, you are going to be able to find very quickly the top 5 accounts that you need to work on for that day. And instead of having to go to 3 different sources to find out who those accounts are, they're right here in a bar, graph, chart, dashboard. Or here are the items that you need to work on today. These are the calls that you need to make. And they're right here within the technology. And you can go into each, you can record your notes, you can save it, and you're done. So you're really getting into what are those things that are tripping people up during the day, keeping them from being efficient? What are those, oh my gosh, I just hate to have to deal with XYZ when I do my job? And really having examples ready and having people, your change champions, at the ready to sort of hear how you're going to meet those pain points and then begin to spread the word to others.
Absolutely. I love that. It sounds to me like in your experience really matched mine that the desire phase of ADKAR is really about a lot of one-on-one conversations.
Yes.
You want to make sure it's, you're talking to your team about it, you're talking to specific roles, but like really you're talking to the individual person, because desire, like we started in the beginning, desire is a personal choice. And so you really want to connect one-to-one. I often look at the middle management or the team lead layer in a business is really, really critical in making sure that any of their team members have crossed this desire barrier in the ADKAR model.
Yes, yes, yes. And I think, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later on, but one of the things that a change champion, a change manager can also help with at this stage is identifying, not only identifying who those change champions might be with that sort of middle management or that team lead, but also identifying for both individuals as well as groups, what are some of the issues that might come up with others who may not have as strong a desire. So sometimes we kind of come in and we see those people that are enthusiastic. And so we're immediately drawn to them, we as sort of change managers and training strategists, and we're immediately drawn to them. But we can't leave out those people whose desires might not be as strong. We need to find out, what is it? What is it that's keeping them from either being excited about it, or what is it that, sometimes it's a fear, like you said, it's a very personal type of thing. So not being dismissive of whatever those folks are, whatever their view or their vision is of the engagement, and really thinking about how we're going to work to speak to those issues. And then that becomes something that an organization can use a little bit further along, which I know we're going to talk about when we get to the training piece and then the reinforcement piece too.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I think really echo what you said there, Tina. I love the bringing in the change champion layer to really build this. I would say in my experience, most of the resistance that I have seen in projects like this and transformations have been because people get stuck at this phase. They understand maybe why the business is doing it, but they just don't buy into how it's going to make their life any better or their role any better. And remember what we said at the beginning, ADKAR is sequential. So if you get stuck here, we're not going to get you through the rest of the change. And so it's really, really important. And that's why I wanted to spend some extra time on this. To all of the managers, people leaders listening, this really is on you. This is really important that you are working with your team, making sure that every single person that you know is going to have to go through this change and this transformation has that personal choice and connection to why it's important to them.
Yeah.
So let's now move on. So let's assume, right, we've done a great job of conveying to the organization why this is happening now. They understand what's in it for them. They've made that personal choice. They have that desire to engage in the change. So what's next? Knowledge is next. So talk to us about knowledge. You're one of the best trainers I've ever worked with. So I know you spent a lot of time in this arena here, Tina.
Yes, yes, yes. Knowledge. So in this stage, I, as a training strategist, or even as a change manager and training strategist, I need to gauge what is the knowledge that the audience that I'm going to be serving, the people that I'm going to be training, the user community, what is the knowledge that they have now? And then what do they need to know in order to use the system for their role? So I need to do a little analysis to find that out. I need to find out who needs to be trained, of course. What do they need to know? And then if there are any gaps, I need to identify those. So if someone has a certain skill set over here or a certain amount of knowledge over here, but the expectation is that they're going to have a different skill set or a new skill set or additional knowledge, then there's a gap there, right? They don't have or know everything that they need to know. So really taking the time to do a very thorough audience analysis on who is going to be using the platform, the ways in which they're going to be using that platform, and how they currently do their work now. And I'm just going to pause to, again, reiterate why it's so important to have a change management and a training strategist early on. Because when you get to this phase, when I, as a change manager or a training strategist, get to this phase, I should have been involved in the project from the very beginning. So as requirements were being gathered, as things were being done on the side to get the platform ready, as processes were being identified, then some of that is going to come into play when I'm ready to go through the process with the stakeholders of identifying what the teams need to know. I've already kind of been in on those conversations. Of course, I'm going to want to lead them from a slightly different lens, but I'm not coming in cold. If you're just bringing me in after all of this has been done, then those conversations have already taken place. Decisions have already been made. And so it's kind of like I'm having to kind of go back and pick up information after the fact. So just to kind of stay on topic here, though, it is really important to understand what is it that people need to know and where are they, so that the training can then come in and be developed to fill that gap.
Right. Because training is ultimately what is happening during this knowledge phase, right? And so you're doing a lot of analysis, you're doing that gap analysis. What's going to be best for these different groups? What exactly do they need to know? And I love what you said about making sure that this isn't just done in isolation. Because I think one of the things that I've seen many, many times in my experience is a really generic training path. Everyone knows that they need to train their team, right?
Yeah.
I don't think people challenge that. I think they definitely do know that they need to get some training out to their team. But what I've seen is a tendency to lean more into very generic or platform-based training. So it's focusing more on, here's where your buttons are. Here's what this navigation was. Here's how you get a report. But it's not taking into consideration the individual processes that those user groups are going through. So talk to us a little bit about that, Tina, in terms of how you are bringing in those processes and role-specific trainings in to really help encourage the knowledge.
Right, right. Yes. So from the beginning, if I'm brought in at the beginning of the project, and I keep saying that plug because I think it is so critical, I am learning about how the platform is built out or customized to meet the needs of the overall business, right? There's sort of no denying that. But when we talk about training individual users and individual teams, we really want to make it very functional and very role based. So the training is not always effective, or the best approach is not always to say, here is the platform in all its glory, and this is everything you need to know about the platform. No, typically the user is served best when I'm saying, okay, this is how your day is structured. This is kind of what you're doing first. And we're going to walk through how the platform supports your work processes. And so having that approach to training for the end user or for that person makes it more real. They begin to see, yes, this is how it's supporting the work that I'm doing. Now, for other types of, user communities, if we're talking about system admins or something like that, then there's another approach that needs to be taken. But yeah, kind of giving them, here's everything you need to know. It's going to overwhelm them. and they're going to feel like they're never going to be able to catch up, or it's too much to say, okay, I get the whole platform. Oh, yeah. And I see how it's going to work for me. And I say that approach as much from experience as from anything else. When I first started working with CRM technologies, I kind of learned it in all its glory and was like, this is fantastic and phenomenal. And so when I shifted into training, I wanted to bring that same approach there. I said, oh, everyone needs to know everything about how amazing this platform is. And honestly, those first trainings that I did fell very flat because people weren't interested in knowing every little thing, like you said, every little button, every little click. They were really like, okay, what does this mean for how I do my job? How does this help me step one, step two, step three? Oftentimes in CRM platforms, there's more than one way to do something. There's more than one way to accomplish something. So I, as a training strategist, have to look at the role and say, what's the best way for them to accomplish this based on what they're doing? So I'm not going to give you 15 different ways to do it. I'm going to give you the way that makes sense for your role.
Perfectly said. um, so knowledge, we've trained our team. That's in the middle of ADKAR, right? There's two things that come after it, ability and
Yeah.
reinforcement. So I say that again, just to remind our listeners, often people are thinking about change management. When they're thinking about user adoption, they're thinking about that training. This is one step in the 5-step ADKAR model. So what comes after the training? It's ability. What does that mean, Tina?
Yeah, the ability is now we're talking about making sure people can go in and do it. So I always recommend training where your users are in there with you. We don't want to do just a show and tell because people don't get it. People are eating their lunch. People are multitasking and doing other things. We always want to have them going in with us and stepping through their processes with us, and then giving them some time to actually do it on their own, play around in it, see how things feel to them, get a sense of how things are laid out within the platform, so that if they run into things that are a little bit, how should I say it? If there's some things that, everyone has things that happen, examples that happen in their workday where everything doesn't go according to plan. You've got some exceptions to what you're doing. And so if you teach people how to move around and have them getting into the system with you, then when those exceptions occur, they can kind of figure out for themselves how that might be managed within the platform. So yeah, that's that abilities piece. That's when you get down to the training. I also want to mention that training is always one of those things that, we get to the end of a project, this, Teresa, we get to the end of an implementation, and sometimes it's the thing that gets the shortest, that gets cut short when time seems to be running out, because people think, well, it's so intuitive, it's so easy to use, and a lot of CRM platforms are, that people can just kind of figure it out and we'll just kind of let them loose in there. But that's not a really good way after you've again spent all this time and resources up till now. You don't want to cut it off too soon. So yeah, got to get
Yeah,
that.
great summary there on the ability stage of ADKAR, Tina. What I would say, people leaders, when you are thinking about this for your team, make sure that you allow your team dedicated time on their calendar to go in and play in the platform. That is really, really imperative, that they feel like they have the time and they are supported by their leadership team to go in and to try things out, to practice, to play around, check, are my deals showing up how they should? Let me see what happens if I make a test deal. Does it go all the way through? Really give them that time. It's really critical, not just to cement that knowledge that they received in training, but this is when that person really starts taking that personal ownership. You're going to see more excitement, more light bulb moments. Oh, this pain point that I mentioned, it's getting solved through this, right? And so really making sure you're giving people that time to spend in the platform, and not just rushing them through it and demanding results very quickly after you go live. Having that runway for your team, which segues really nicely into the final stage of ADKAR, which is reinforcement. And I like to say reinforcement is the stage that never ends. This is something that you need to constantly be thinking about, because reinforcement isn't just, hey, you did your training, you're signed in, good job. It's, well, are you using it the way we wanted to? Are you doing as many activities in the system as we thought? Is it helping your process? Is it helping you move, if you're in sales, right? Is it helping you move your deals? If you're in service, is it helping you close more tickets and manage to a tighter SLA? I'm constantly looking back at those things. And this is really where I say measurables are king. Measurables become very, very important. One of the things that we do at Dynamico for our HubSpot implementations is we build different adoption dashboards at the end of our project. So we can actually see, okay, who's logged in? Okay, who's synced their Outlook over? Okay, who's created a deal, right? And you're constantly looking for this activity, because what you're going to find in this phase is some people got stuck somewhere further in that ADKAR cycle. You might see all of a sudden that you have a team member who hasn't logged in at all. Then your job as a leader is to look at that person, and then you have to figure out, where did they get stuck in that ADKAR process? Is it just because they don't want to? Because then they're stuck on the desire. Is it because they don't even know why it's important for the business? Well, they're stuck on awareness. Is it because they just don't know how to? We got to go back and revisit the knowledge and the ability with training, right? So it's really making sure that you're going back. What else would you add in, Tina, about that reinforcement
Oh,
stage?
wow. You know what? I think you covered almost all the bases. I would also just tell our audience that here again, why it's important to have a dedicated change management person on the team is that, people get excited after training has happened. Of course, we want them to be excited, and they get in and they use the system. And what a change management strategist can help you get back to are some of those things that Teresa pointed out, the reinforcement pieces of it. Now, sometimes in the reality of it is, you have finished your time with a partner like Dynamico when the system actually goes live and your folks are in and using it. And so sometimes that might be the time that we actually drop off. So if you've engaged us from that change management strategy perspective, then we've helped you identify what some of those reinforcements are going to be, and also how you can identify, like Teresa said, some of those points of resistance. So even if we as the strategist are no longer sitting there with you, you have a game plan, you have a blueprint, you have something that you can look at after we're gone to identify what's going on in terms of user adoption. And you can be in there, you and your leadership teams can be in there making sure that you're speaking to those areas, and that you're constantly, as Teresa mentioned, reinforcing that user adoption. So that's going to serve you very, very well.
And again, why is this all important? Why do we need to spend time making sure that every person on our team has gone through these ADKAR phases? It's because you will only see the ROI that you really wanted to get out of this investment, out of a platform change, if the actual people using it are using it and they're using it in the right way, which is why this is so, so critical. And it is an easy thing to cut when time gets short. Oh, our team is smart, they're savvy, they'll figure it out. If you're really, really serious about getting the ROI out of this implementation or out of whatever technology transformation you are doing, make sure you're just as serious about getting your people there too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said, Teresa.
Awesome. Tina, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners here as we wrap up our conversation?
I think I just want to, and I know I've been saying this, I probably sound like a broken record, but I really just have to reiterate how important it is to have a change management and a training strategist as part of your CRM delivery and implementation team. Just having the bells and whistles is really not enough. And even for a platform like HubSpot, which is really easy to get in a very basic and a very minimal viable product sort of way, is really easy to kind of get up and running with. In terms of user adoption, that's kind of a whole different thing. So if you're going to make the investment in the platform, whether it's HubSpot or whether it's some other CRM tool, they're made so that, from the perspective of, being able to use it right away, you can use it right away, but using it right away is something very different than user adoption. And so, that would probably be the parting thing that I would have for our audiences, to make sure that you've really thought through how you're going to do user adoption.
Well said. Well, Tina, it's been a pleasure having you on today's episode of RevOps
This has
Champions.
been
Thank you
fun.
for all of the greatness that you bring to our clients, making sure that their users are adopting, they're ready for go lives, and they're getting the most out of their system. If you have any questions about anything you heard here today, you can always reach out to the Dynamico team. Best of luck. Thank you, folks.
Thanks, guys.